Welcome to the Holistic Wealth Hustle Podcast, where you can get a lifetime upgrade to stop pursuing happiness and start letting joy pursue you. That's right, it's your turn to be pursued by pure joy. This is your host, Pamela Ramos Brown of Be Wealthy with Pamela, LLC, celebrating 20 years as an experienced management consultant and personal coach. Are you in the mid-sized business race, a woman entrepreneur, solopreneur, or a professional who believes you can always do better for yourself and others? We're there with you, so you won't have to go alone. In every episode of the Holistic Wealth Hustle, we help decode the secrets of all elements of true wealth, not just financial, but also inclusive of life, love, and work. We exchange practical strategies, share inspiring stories, and offer actionable insights to help unlock our authority for the joyful life beyond what we envision. Let's go together from tolerating the ordinary to enjoying the supernatural. Today's podcast is about ESG, environmental, social, and governance. That is not make-believe in life, love, and work. Environmental looks at climate change, environmental compliance, and more. And social covers diversity and equality, human rights, employee relations, and more. Governance looks at things like a company's leadership, how executives are compensated, procurement practices, and how money is prioritized, and more. Benefits of an ESG strategy leads to better reputations for corporate responsibilities, reduced costs, and more. And business risks and consequences for not preparing well for holistic ESG, we have a couple of examples for that. For instance, there has been a spotlight on the Texas grid while everyone is holding their breath regarding the Arctic storm. But fortunately for Texas, they did well. The grid held up and things went well. It wasn't a perfect story, but it was definitely a big improvement. And so also there are environmental justice issues that have happened in places like Mississippi, Michigan, Camp Lejeune with those dirty water crises that they've had. And on the social side, which is kind of where I like to focus on to a great extent, is when we talked about a national company who won an award for best diversity for their commercial that they put out. They actually put out a commercial talking about diversity, and they won a national award for it. However, the same company got sued in a class action lawsuit for discrimination. So as you can see, there's a little bit of a disconnect there. And also, I read this sign one time. I think I may have been at the beauty shop. And no, it was at an office of one of my clients. And I thought it was really cute. But it did kind of remind me of some ESG issues, especially on the social side. And it was really talking about the scapegoat mentality. And the sign said, to err is human. And to blame it on someone else shows management potential. So let me let you think on that one for a minute. To err is human, but to blame it on someone else shows management potential. So it's a joke, but actually that is something that's practiced in everyday life. When we see the poor employees, have to get the hatchet, fall on the knife for some of the higher ups who don't want to necessarily take the blame. And also, we know that this ESG, when people don't have a great ESG with regards to the social side and human rights, treating the employee rights and things like that, those are some of the things that have contributed to what we see now, the great resignation era, the quiet quitting revolution. And one of the things that we have seen that we notice kind of sort of tied to this from a financial, accounting, and consulting perspective is that one of the underlying things that have contributed to these types of things, the problems in the workforce, where there's, the employer versus the employee situation, is this CEO compensation has been tied to pleasing stockholders, pleasing the owners, pleasing, all of their investors and people like that, instead of pleasing their customers and not making employees happy to stay. And so really, some companies are really realizing just how valuable employees are as internal customers. They are, part of what has been coined to be internal customers, because these are your customers that can, make or break how much revenue you make and how your expenses go. And so we know that CEOs are making multi-millions in some corporations. And there are, in many workplaces, there are employees that can barely afford to work at those places. They can barely afford to pay for gas to drive to work, for childcare. They can barely afford a place to live without sharing space with incompatible roommates, where they have to, rent out a room and things like that, just to be able to afford to live, in an apartment or a home. And then there are these degrading employee reviews versus the company looking to see where there are gaps in what the employees need with regards to support and providing those resources. Because I know that a lot of times the employers like them blame it on the employees, but oftentimes it's really the company, the management, and some of the business practices that's really the problem in a lot of cases, where employees really don't live up to their potential and know how to do a good job for that company, or are motivated at those companies. And so a lot of times it's because the businesses refuse to make improvements, and they refuse to develop their managers on the level that they should be. And so this is, ESG on the social side, again, where oftentimes these are some of the consequences that go wrong when you are not on top of your game when it comes to that component of ESG. And so today, companies are moving toward a more holistic approach to ESG. And at Be Wealthy with Pamela, we definitely love the word holistic when we're talking about most things. And so with regards to ESG, we'd certainly like for you to be holistic as well. And so holistic ESG is about looking at the whole business's impacts on the world around it. In other words, businesses are moving beyond going green and addressing the full range of environmental, social, and corporate governance factors. This includes everything from carbon emissions and climate risk to workplace safety and human rights to board compensation and anti-bribery and corruption. Yes, indeed. Now, these are some information that we received from Parolin.com, and lots of information out there on the web, including Harvard Business Review and et cetera. And so they also say that the trend toward companies moving toward managing ESG is at the asset level. And this is where it refers to using software and sensors to capture data at the source, such as vehicles and equipment. So instead of, just looking at what companies are doing in their departments and what the people are doing, they actually are going to put some software and some sensors on the equipment that those employees are using in the vehicles to kind of get a better and a closer look as to, what is going on with those equipment and vehicle and other fixed assets. And so my question is, with regards to this sensor and software, and these is just some being facetious a little bit, I want to know, with this software and sensors, will it beep every time the manager gets low down and dirty and nasty with the employee? Will an alarm go off at the sound of employees snoring on the job because they're bored to death with some of the things that the companies are asking them to do? And on a slightly more serious but not so presently practical note, it would be nice if the software was able to capture everything real time to see if there's a diversity and inclusion in these wealth transactions, such as carbon credits and more. Because with ESG, they're getting everybody to try to stop with emissions and polluting the air and things like that. So they actually incentivizing corporations. Anytime that the corporations could say, hey, we reduced our emissions, we're not polluting the air anymore by 1%. And so that 1% equals up to $1 million for us. So can you give us a check for that $1 million that we just saved the world? And so things like that are happening to some extent, just to put it in simplistic terms. But one of the things that really does need to happen is that every time that there is some kind of, money making and wealth building transactions going on, that diversity and inclusion should be included in them. And it would be lovely when we get to the day where there's some kind of monitor that is real time that shows that this is happening. And so I was watching a movie recently called Lift, and it was starring Kevin Hart and some others. And so I said, well, maybe they can develop one of those recording devices that was in the movie, like Lift. It's similar, that it can go anywhere and it can record anything from any angle within the vicinity. And it would be so nice to see if they could use that. They can just have these all over the place and just capture whether or not diversity and inclusion is in all of these business meetings, business deals, money transfers, and all of that kind of stuff. And so, but of course, with the movie with starring Kevin Hart called Lift, we had a good time learning and laughing. So who knows? You never know. May come down to it. So just think about it. If corporations were able to monetize how many times they were able to include minorities by reducing and avoiding the excuses of, hey, we tried, but we were not able to achieve diversity, then wouldn't that be a win for all if they were able to get monetized every time they did achieve diversity? So yes, that would be a win for all because we know money talks. And so sometimes that's what it takes to really get people to do right that they should do from an ESG perspective. So here are some lessons from history that could be considered useful today. So when we're talking about lessons from history that are learning tools, I like to go to the History Channel and also Britannica Online Encyclopedia. Between the two of them, they show some really good information that I just found is so, enlightening with regards to some things that have happened that we should all learn from. And these lessons came from companies who were excessively focused on competitive profitability. And these were considered to be the big four. And they included the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, and JP Morgan, of course. And so one of the things that they talked about that just stood out to me when I looked at the series was the famous Homestead strike. And this one was the one that involved Carnegie. And so in pursuit of the title of the wealthiest man in the world, Carnegie hired an unscrupulous manager. And as a result of hiring this manager, then he was trying to reduce expenses. And we know that, it's harder sometimes to manage the employee side of your financial statement than the expenses side. So what he decided to do is try to hire this manager in there to reduce his employee expenses. In some cases, he wanted to reduce them by, letting people go. In other cases, he really wanted to reduce them by reducing their salaries. He didn't want to really let people go. He wanted to keep people reduce their salaries, increase their workloads, make them work longer hours, and decrease their benefits, all kinds of things. Have them working in poor, dangerous work environments, and all kinds of things like that, instead of spending money to fix the equipment and stuff like that. And so it turned out to be, as a result of hiring this manager and the things that the gentleman brought in, it ended up with employees getting shot. There were assassination attempts. There were union fights that took place, and it was a mess. Not a mess, but a mess. And so if you ever get a chance to watch, about that, you will just really be entertained and enlightened. And so the crazy thing about it is that, Carnegie wasn't really experiencing any like sometimes businesses go through things where, they are struggling financially. They may not be making enough money to actually pay the payroll. And that's understandable. Sometimes if you just, if your expenses are more than your revenue, then you do have to make some adjustments. But in these particular cases for a lot of these gentlemen, they were already rich. They were profitable, and these people were working in these dangerous work environments, working 12 hours plus they already were working at, not so high level pay anyway, but then they reduced their pay, increased their hours, and, just made things dangerous for them. And we knew they were dangerous because people got hurt, people got killed. And so they were working for this low pay and lots of hours with unfit tools while working like heck for the rich. Now that's crazy. And the whole thing was about a competition. They wanted to compete against each other to say that, I made the most money with spending the least amount of money. And now I can say that I was more profitable than the other person, and so at the expense of the employees, they ended up causing all of these problems for everyone. And of course, eventually it did backfire on them. But these were some of the things that happened, in our history that we all have to learn from. And believe it or not, we could say what we want to, but we know, we look around, that there are, organizations that are doing that right now, because a lot of people are in competition to be the best. And so part of it has to do with the way that CEOs are compensated. And so there was a big change in the early 90s. I remember it because I was in grad school at that time. And so one of the things that we talked about in grad school was, how CEO compensation changed. Now we're in the experience economy and different things like that. And so Harvard had a article out, and they talked about CEO compensation. And one of the things that is happening, like in big firms, is they have this thing called total shareholder returns. And so this means that the companies, everything that they do in the company pretty much has to be focused on making sure that the shareholder gets the highest return for their money, because these are the people that invested in their company. So they have to make sure that everything that they do involves, maximizing the returns to their shareholders. So it doesn't matter whether or not, that they didn't say how, they didn't say that, even if that means doing what the Carnegie did to get to that top total return is okay or not okay with them. They just say, hey, we need the maximum return on our investment. And then for other companies, a lot of times the CEO compensation is tied to what they call EBITDA, which is the earnings before interest, taxes, and oftentimes depreciation and amortization. And so one of the things, so that may not sound like that has anything to do with employee expenses, payrolls, and stuff like that, because it mostly just says interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. But the earnings that they say, that they refer to, that's really net income. That means revenue minus expense. And so that expense part is where the employees' payroll and salary come in at that point. So the smaller amount of the expenses, the bigger the revenue, then that means that the EBITDA is going to be better. And so that's why a lot of times, first things companies do is look to one of their biggest expenses, which is oftentimes payroll. That's what these companies did. And like I said, a lot of these companies were already wealthy, already profitable, but again, they wanted to be the best. And so that's how they decided to be competitive. And so, again, this is one of the things that Harvard Business Review talked about with regards to using some of those metrics to determine how successful a company is. It says some executives enjoyed a huge windfall from the long-running bull market that was fueled not only by corporate performance, but also by factors beyond management control, such as declining inflation and lower interest rates. So in other words, these CEOs were getting paid, to have high performing metrics, but the truth was some of their performance in TSR didn't even come from how well they managed the organization. It's simply, some of it was affected by the fact that there was declining inflation and lower interest rates. So they got compensated more based on inflation and interest. And they also felt that there was a solution to this problem. And they said that to promote higher levels of achievement from poor performing CEOs who did benefit from those things, such as, like I said, the inflation and the interest rate. So one way to achieve, to promote higher levels of achievement was to look at all levels of the corporation, not just the top, and how they must be considered in the overall achievement of the organization. So if you're looking at all levels of the organization, how all levels of the organization, not just the CEO, because we know that the CEO doesn't do everything at the organization. They are not the only ones that's contributing to the organizations. They're not the only ones that should get credit for the organization. And definitely they are not the only ones who should get compensated at the organization. So this is what they recommended. And I agree that all levels of the organization should be properly compensated. Now, Harvard Business Review, I'm not sure if they went so far as to say that they should be compensated, but definitely they should be given credit to all of those other areas of the organization. But I feel like from the bottom to the top should be compensated, and it should be not just a certain percentage across the board. It should be comparable to the level of contribution and equitable. So what's happening now? Well, we see what's happening now. You watch the news, Google just had something very, very recently. And so, however, just throughout the last year or so, there have been massive layoffs. One staffing agency called Mondo, they had a report and they listed quite a few companies that had massive layoffs. Pixar, that's part of Disney, they had a major layoff. Even though they had just recently gained 7 million subscribers, they still had a major layoff. Google, Amazon, Xerox, DoorDash, Zoom, Twitter, which is now X, Hasbro, that makes the toys for the kids, and State Street from the banking sector, and several more. So there have been massive layoffs, and we don't know whether or not all these layoffs have been because the companies don't have enough to pay the employees, or if in a lot of these cases, companies are letting go of employees because they're using more technology with the artificial intelligence, augmented reality, all kinds of things that they are using to turn into automation versus employees. And so, and there are a multitude of things that companies are doing to invest in instead of employees. And so, of course, in some cases, there are companies that are laying off employees because of challenges of their revenues not being sufficient enough to keep the employees. But there is a story that I learned from the History Channel as well that was very encouraging. And this was about the Hershey chocolate company, and which was led by Milton Hershey. And I was really impressed by the fact that during the Great Depression, when everybody else let all of their employees go, a lot of them shut down. But Milton Hershey did not. He kept all of his employees on the job. His accountant, took the initiative to put together a plan of who all the company was going to let go, and worked, gave them some projected financials of if he let these number of employees go in this department, this number of employees go in this department, how they could stay afloat, still be profitable, this, that, and the other. And Milton Hershey sent them back to the drawing board. He said, nope. He said, I want to keep all of the employees. And so that's what he was able to do, because that's what he decided to do as a leader. And so he decided to make whatever adjustments that he needed to make to keep his employees there working. And one of the things I learned about him too, after I looked more into his company and how he ran things, and I'm not saying he was a perfect person. He has a little reputation for being, some imperfections, of course. But one of the things that I did see that was very encouraging is that when he moved his company into this kind of rural type of area to build his factory, then he also built housing for the people. And for the people who didn't live there, he also had transportation for them to get to work. He ended up building a school. He ended up helping to support the orphans, and all kinds of things that he did that really would make him a good ESG leader today. And so one of the things that he did, he got very creative. He, when the employees didn't have enough, there was not enough work coming in for chocolate sales, and the employees didn't have enough work to do to produce chocolate, because the chocolate was not selling as well because of the depression. So he began doing building projects where he was doing repair and construction type projects throughout the area. And then he was fortunate enough to get a contract with the military to provide rations for soldiers, because, hey, who doesn't love chocolate? The soldiers got a chance to get some of that good chocolate too. So wasn't that wonderful? So again, even though they were not perfect and they had employee issues like most organizations, one of the big pluses on the books is the way that they were committed to keeping their employees. And that's something that really can be modeled for some of today's issues. And then we also had with another lesson that we learned from it. We had JP Morgan, and he was a person that had accumulated so much wealth and so much knowledge from a financial perspective that the whole entire the United States, because they didn't have their own central bank at that time, they ended up having to turn to this one man that the United States had to turn to bail out the whole country during the financial crisis. And as a result of that, we now today have the Federal Reserve. So that is something that's truly amazing. And so we look at it now but still the top. If you look at the wealth of the United States, it still rests in the hands of, I think it's somewhere between 1% to 3%, and the percentage is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So we're almost getting back to that time where the entire wealth of the entire United States is going to, is just about in the hands of one or a few people, a handful of people. So, okay, so here we go. We have to learn from history and do something about it. But we all know the saying that history repeats itself. So I'm hoping that's not one that we'll go back to anytime soon. So also, the best news is that these gentlemen eventually did use their competitive spirits for good. They decided, instead of being the trying to be the most competitive of who can, cut employees' salaries, make employees work the longest hours, and get by with the cheapest labor as possible, so that they can maximize their profitability. So they did a different thing with their competitive nature. They started using it for good by seeing who could be the biggest philanthropist, which was good. We all ended up benefiting from that, because they created and contributed to mega legacies such as the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Carnegie Hall, Rockefeller Plaza, and a multitude of libraries, schools, museums, and more. So there are a lot of things that they contributed to that really did benefit us, continues to benefit us today. We hope that everybody learned a good lesson from this, and that we use this to improve our current situation and our future. And for those of you who aspire to be wealthy with Pamela, are you prepared to do what you need to do right with your fortune and power when it comes to you? That is my question. Thank you for continuing to be a part of the Holistic Wealth Hustle podcast by Be Wealthy with Pamela LLC. Each episode is designed to please. Be sure to take swift action on what you have learned today and update your weekly wealth planner or your holistic plan workbook to receive your rewards of joyfulness. Feel free to leave your comments below or by contacting us at www.bewealthywithpamela.com. That's B-E wealthy with PAMELA.com. Please subscribe, share, stay tuned, and let joy pursue you.